Hello and welcome to Projector, and on this episode, Kendrick and Justin Timberlake are back as trolls going on a world tour to save music.
Queen Poppy, voiced by Anna Kendrick, is surprised to discover that she and her pop trolls are not alone and that there are many kinds of trolls with their own distinct musical styles who long ago separated from each other with their own magical strings. Rock, led by Rachel Bloom's Barb, country, led by Kelly Clarkson's Delta Dawn, classical, led by Gustavo Dudamel's Trolls Art, techno, led by Anthony Ramos's King Troll X, and funk, led by George Clinton's King Quincy and Mary J. Blige's Queen Essence. But Barb is leading her rock trolls on a world tour to steal and possess all the strings to destroy all other kinds of music, and now Poppy, alongside Justin Timberlake's Branch and James Corden's Biggie, must venture to find and unite these new trolls if they want to restore harmony.
You might recall that I was not really much of a fan of the original Trolls back in 2016, which is of course very loosely based on Toyline. In fact, I found it sugary, upbeat, almost forced level of positivity to be rather grating. It's like a Richter's grin of a movie, but kids very much disagreed, and that film managed to garner almost $350 million at the worldwide box office, as well as getting a Christmas special and a Netflix spin-off series, so kids loved their Trolls, and it was inevitable it was going to get a sequel. In fact, much of the creative team behind the first film returns for this one, including notably director Walt Dorn, who also provides a number of incidental voices in the supporting cast. Which brings us to the unusual circumstances of Trolls World Tour release, because, as we know, this was meant to be a big theatrical spring tentpole, and yet it's now on premium VOD because of COVID-19. Certainly this threw the cat among the pigeons when it came to the relationship between cinema chains and studios, the former being extremely vigilant about protecting that release window and not showing any movies that break it. But for Universal, they really had no choice. They'd already committed to the rollout, they'd spent their marketing budget, and the film was out there. The film was already out in parts of Asia in mid-March theatrically, so they couldn't have sat on the movie waiting for cinemas to reopen, because by that point it would have been very widely pirated. Thus the solution is a premium VOD rental, £16 in the UK, $20 in the US. That is a bit steep if you're watching it by yourself like I did, but if you've got a family there, that more than covers the theatrical ticket price, so it's a bit of a fair deal. And if you do want to see this movie theatrically, just hope you have a drive-in theatre near you, because it is being rolled out to them as well. This has resulted in a lot of think pieces asking, is Trolls World Tour the future of cinema, as balmy a statement as that is? Are we going to be watching new releases on our TVs and laptops from this point forward? And I would argue that's all a bit overblown. I think that this is an exceptional circumstance in very strange times. It's Universal trying to make the best of a bad situation. I don't think that once things return to normal, we're suddenly going to abandon cinema chains in entirety. In fact, I did kind of miss the fact that I was not seeing this on the big screen, because it really was suited for that. Getting back to the film itself though, this is a far more confident film than its predecessor, in large part because the filmmakers know what works. They know that kids like the songs, they like the visual style, and they like the humour, and this sequel plays towards all three, and knowing your strengths makes Trolls World Tour a superior film to the original, in my opinion, and I was surprised how much I actually found myself laughing. In particular, the humour in the film is borderline non-sequiturs. They really lean into their odder instincts. I think that's in large part because the filmmakers are trying to keep up with both internet memes while also the surreal humour that now characterises a lot of animated children's programming. And so what you end up getting is a lot of scenes that are very, very unusual and creative in their own ways. There's a sequence where Poppy and Branch are terrorised by a smooth jazz bounty hunter, and they start having this delirious dream sequence. And this scene where they start fantasising about eating each other as pieces of sushi and things like that is almost an encapsulation of the entire film in general. They go for whatever off-the-wall idea that they can think of and just fully commit to. And that's also can be seen in just the visual style of the movie. That was one of the great things about the first movie, I thought, is that the animation in particular was extremely strong, and there was a very, very distinct style with the designs, especially in that there's a obvious attempt to make it very hand-stitched and fabric-y. The texture of the trolls has this kind of felt-like appearance. And when it comes to creating all of these new worlds, they've definitely embraced that even further. For example, the hard rock trolls have a lot of leather and denim worked into their designs, which is especially noticeable in their introduction when they arrive with their big ships and the mouths literally unzip themselves. Later, we meet the country trolls, which takes place in a desert that on closer inspection appears to be quilted, but it's most creative in the film's opening sequence with the techno trolls, which has this retro gaming arcadey feel which makes sense for EDM and go into these kaleidoscopic waves and patterns that are very colourful and also seizure inducing. Be very cautious if you have children with epilepsy, I'll just give you the heads up there, but nevertheless shows the commitment of the filmmakers to make these bold visual choices. They obviously decided to massively expand the Trolls world and do so in a way where each of them are very distinctive, and certainly you can say that this movie is never boring. Certainly it'll hold kids' attention because whenever we go to a new landscape or a new situation or we meet a new kind of trolls, the style of the movie changes dramatically. You definitely get the sense that they are experimenting now they were more assured of themselves. There are sights in Trolls World Tour that you wouldn't normally see outside of hallucinogenics, and I mean that as a compliment. There's an exuberance to the Trolls films, a radiant positivity and happiness that very much feels sincere, even for someone like me who bristles up against it because I'm a bit more jaded and cynical. I found myself overpowered by the sheer joyousness of it all. There's a creative freedom that allows them to follow weird non sequiturs and occasionally stumble on brilliance. For better or worse, this does have the vibe of a writer's room just going in all different directions, and that does manifest itself in the way that the movie occasionally feels like it has a short attention span. It'll set up ideas and supporting characters, but not really follow through. A good example of this is Tiny Diamond, voiced by Kenan Thompson. That is a bizarre sequence, his birth out of Guy Diamond, but after that sequence and that rather obnoxious hip-hop song that he sings, that character is just another peripheral supporting player that pops up intermittently. He factors in no way into the plot of the movie, and the film keeps doing this, especially with its supporting cast. It wastes Sam Rockwell, which I think is frankly criminal. He voices a country troll called Hickory. Like the other country trolls, he's a centaur in terms of design, and I like that they gave Rockwell a song to cover on the soundtrack, but in terms of what that character actually does for the story, it's like they didn't quite know what to do with him. He tags along with the heroes of the film, and then they have to forcibly separate him from the heroes for a stretch of the movie, and it's really weird and awkward. He just disappears and reappears whenever they need him to. Likewise, James Corden gets an expanded role as Biggie, joining Branch and Poppy on their adventure, even though really he has very little to add other than just standing there and occasionally being comic relief. It feels like the character only has more screen time because Corden is a bigger star, and honestly, I wouldn't have minded if he was in this less. It feels like Corden is far too ubiquitous in family animated films. Does he not turn down any of these jobs anymore? It does feel like the movie has too many characters and is just overly busy at times so that not all the ideas stick. The rock trolls, they are fun, and Rachel Bloom is definitely enjoying herself as Barb. Ozzy Osborne is literally wheeled on as her father, the king. But they didn't quite know what to do with those characters in their scenes, so what ends up happening is that we just keep cutting back to Barb reciting how they're going to make everyone rock trolls and her plan over and over again. Yes, we know. It does feel like the plot, such as it is largely just an excuse to go from one location to have a song and go to the next location to have another song. Just go from song to song to song to song. And I didn't know in the first Trolls movie how the plot of that did seem very thin. This one is perhaps even thinner, and I think that that's really noticeable in how much they're so reliant on the songs this time out. And it's a bit of a shame because later on, the movie does manage to find actually some nugget of deep insight. There are later developments where they touch upon ideas of cultural appropriation and how history is written by the winners, and certainly the idea of all these musical groups definitely seems like it's meant to be an analogy to things like various different cultures and races. Like the first film, this is pushing a message of acceptance and tolerance, and especially that of diversity. Yes, the allegory maybe does get stretched a little bit thin, even more so in something like Zootopia, but it does still land. And I think that in a more focused movie, some of these ideas that creep into the third act in an almost subversive kind of way would have built into the finale a bit more. The movie definitely touches upon them, but doesn't really do very much with them in the grand scheme of things. Although it is nice to see that the movie is very committed to that message, right down to the fact that it blasts it out in literally rainbow colours. But I do think that the main approach of the film is to push as many different songs as possible and different genres, right down to the fact that they incorporate these bounty hunters that add even more different types of music into the film. You've got yodelers, you've got a smooth jazz troll voiced very briefly by Jamie Dornan, you've got Red Velvet as a bunch of K-pop trolls, you've got reggaeton trolls, and admittedly I did ask myself, how does this really make sense? How do these trolls have their various communities when only the first 6 have their magical musical notes? Were they apparently not allowed? Did they come too late to the party to get their own magical notes? It doesn't really hold up to scrutiny, and again, it goes back to the fact that obviously this movie had a lot of different rewrites and different changes in direction over the course of its development, and sometimes it does rehash ideas from the first movie as well, especially near the end where the lowest dramatic point for the characters is outright replicated. In terms of the voice performances, Anna Kendrick once again provides a hyperactive version of herself as Poppy, and while I like Kendrick as a performer, this can get a little bit taxing after a while, but that is also worked into the plot because Poppy, now she's a queen, she's still far too headstrong and she's not really listening to anyone else. Yes, she takes the initiative, but that's even when everyone else is telling her it's a bad idea, and that's largely coming from Justin Timberlake's branch, who doesn't really get much to do in this outing, largely because he's pretty much just there to be sarcastic and cynical. His major subplot is that he's trying to express his feelings for her if she'll actually listen long enough for him to tell her that. But unfortunately, because he spends so much of the movie just being ignored, it feels like he doesn't really do very much for the first 2/3 of the movie, and as such, Timberlake doesn't get much to work with in terms of his performance. He does, however, provide a lot more when it comes to the soundtrack because, like the first film, he helped supervise it. And certainly, this embraces just being a full-on musical, and certainly the songs are staged with gusto, especially in terms of the animation, which is really in your face and extremely, extremely colourful. It pretty much just throws glitter at the screen as many times as possible. And a special highlight for me was the Cyndi Lauper cover of Girls Just Want to Have Fun, tweaked to Trolls Just Want to Have Fun. Kendrick and Timberlake get a good duet together, covering the song Perfect For You at a key moment. Rachel Bloom does her best, all the rock covers that are thrown her way, like Rock You Like a Hurricane. There was one song that I really didn't like, which is a mashup of different pop songs, from things like the Spice Girls to Gangnam Style. That's right, this is a 2020 movie that has Gangnam Style in it, and yes, it does feel painfully dated. I do think the movie, though, is a bit overly reliant on covers. I would have liked to have seen a few more original songs, at least more prominently placed. It's very odd because in anticipation for the soundtrack's release, they released 2 singles of Timberlake's original songs, one of which is a collaboration with Anderson .Paak, but unfortunately those songs are largely used over the end credits, which feels like a major missed opportunity. And I do think there are perhaps too many songs in here, to the point where none of them quite stand out in the way that some of the best songs in the first film did. It certainly doesn't reach the heights of Kendrick's Get Back Up Again or the cover of True Colours that were really the standout moments of the first film. I genuinely wasn't expecting Trolls World Tour to actually be slightly superior to its predecessor. I have to be honest, I was dreading this movie based off of the trailers, and the fact that I paid £16 for the privilege of watching it didn't exactly endear me to it either. However, I think the sequel has a far better sense of self. I think that visually it looks gorgeous and bonkers at the same time. I think the gags are more effective. The story is surprisingly sly, but with the caveat that the songs aren't quite as good this time out. But I don't think that will really matter to most kids, especially those who are hungry for trolls, or frankly any kind of distraction in the current climate. And speaking of that, having a movie that radiates such optimism is maybe something that we need right now, something to keep the spirits up. So yes, while I think parents will probably have to brace themselves for 90 minutes of sheer colourful assault on the senses, kids will embrace that wholeheartedly. Obviously, because I'm older than about 12, I can't fully recommend this movie, but if you have kids, it'll do the job.
Trolls World Tour leans into the most successful elements of its predecessor, as now there is even more songs, and the humour is so off the wall that it gets downright surreal at times, with the animation looking especially gorgeous and playful as it goes through different styles for all the new troll tribes. There's an exuberant creativity and positivity that is both a strength and weakness of the Trolls films. If you found the last entry overpoweringly sugary, this will give you a headache. And it isn't surprising there are 5 credited writers given gags to throw in all directions, but they didn't come up with much of a story. The songs are energetically performed, but the focus on covers means that few stand out in the way that some of the best songs in the first film did, although it is nice to see that the film is ultimately a rainbow-coloured celebration of diversity. The sequel is a slight improvement that kids will lap up, while their parents will hope to tolerate it.
If you like this review, then the beat goes on over at my Patreon, where you can see my reviews early among other perks, including access to my Discord server. But until next time, I'm Matthew Buck, fading out.